Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, Distinctive Crochet. My name is Priscilla, and today we are continuing on in part 2 for learning how to knit a hat. And so far we have worked up our 7 inches. So let me just grab my measuring tape and show you guys. So you needed to go ahead and work the knit stitch all the way around. And keep going until your hat measures in length approximately 7 inches. So there we have it. It's about 7 inches. So what we're going to be doing now is we're just going to go ahead and start doing some simple decreases today. So that is what I wanted to show you so that we can get ready to close up our hat. And then after that, we'll come back and work a brim for our hat. But I'll be teaching you how to do the purl stitch. That way you can have some ribbing, some 2x2 ribbing, which is just 2 knit stitches and then 2 purl stitches alternating like that, so that you can have a nice stretchy rib beanie brim. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to let me get my attention a little bit better so you guys can see that. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and knit 12 stitches. So we're just bringing our right hand needle around to the left side of our stitch. We're inserting our needle and putting the needle on top of the left hand needle, and then we're going to wrap our yarn with our thumb and bring that stitch down and then off the right hand needle on, off the left hand needle onto the right hand needle. Okay, so bring it over, cross on top, flick your yarn, bring it down and off the needle. Okay, so we need to do 12 of these stitches. I have 2 done, so I'm just going to work up 10 more really quick. So if you needed more help with that, you need to go back to part 1 where I show you how to do that knit stitch if you need a little refresher. And for this right here, we're just going to work up our 12 stitches, and then we are going to do a decrease. So I lost where I was at. So good idea for a stitch marker when you're doing your decreases. So if you were not using a stitch marker, go ahead and put your stitch marker where your first stitch is. That way you know where your round ends. All right, so we have 2, 4, 6, 7. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a decrease. Now there are lots of decreases in knitting. For this particular one, all we're going to do is the knit 2 together, and that is just pretty much a basic decrease. So you're just going to do the same thing you did for the knit stitch, except for you're going to do that while going into 2 stitches at the same time. So we're going to go, so here's the stitch we would normally go into. We're going to actually go into this stitch and then put our needle through both of those stitches at the same time. So we're going to take our right hand needle and bring it over to the left side of the stitches. We're going to find that second stitch and then bring our needle through that stitch as well, all the way up to that first stitch. So you can see that I do have both of those stitches. Let me see if I can bring them apart. So you can see I have both of those stitches on my needle. Okay, and then I have the needle on top just as if I were going to do a knit stitch. Okay, now since I have both of them on there, now I'm ready to go ahead and flick my yarn over, and then I'm going to bring that needle down. Oops, do that again. Okay, now I'm going to bring my needle down and pull both of those stitches off. Okay, and if you look at it, it's just you can see how the 2 stitches down here are hanging off of this 1 stitch here. Okay, So you have just knitted 2 stitches together, and that is a decrease. So we're going to continue that same pattern all the way around the hat. So we're just going to be knitting 12 stitches, and then we're going to knit 2 together. Okay, so let me go ahead and do this next one with you. So we're doing 1, 2, push up some more stitches, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oops, 8, 9, put up some more stitches, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so now we're ready to decrease again. So now we need to go ahead and find those next 2 stitches and make sure we go into that second stitch. We're going to enter through that stitch and then push our needle all the way up to that front stitch. Okay, and we're going to knit those 2 together. All right, so just flick your yarn, bring your needle down as if you were knitting just 1 stitch, but you're just going through 2. All right, and then pull it off. Okay, so now we have to do this 4 more times, and then we should be all the way back around to our hat. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and work mine off camera, and then I will meet you back at the beginning of the round to let you know what to do next. So you can just pause your video here and go ahead and work the rest of the round with those decreases. So all you're doing is you're going to knit 12 and then knit 2 together. Okay, and that should bring you back all the way around to the start. All right, so let me go ahead and work mine, and I will meet you back. All right, so I made it back, and I had made it back around. So after you had knit 12 and knit 2 together, it should have been a total of 6 times. You should have made it back around. So what we're going to do now is for this round, we're just going to knit every stitch. Okay, so you're just going to knit each stitch all the way around. So just like a regular normal row. And now I'm just going to show you guys what those decrease stitches look like when you come to them. Just so you can recognize that, but pretty much we're just going to be knitting this round plain. Okay, so got 2 more stitches. Okay, so you can you'll notice this stitch here was kind of farther apart from that last stitch, as I noticed on mine. That's how I could find it. And this is the stitch that we knitted 2 together. So so that is our decrease. Okay, so if it looks like what did I do wrong with this stitch, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just that's your decrease there. So all you're going to do is you're just going to knit that just the same as the other stitches, and you're just going to continue that all the way around. Okay, so I'm just going to continue knitting mine, and then I will meet you all back when I have that round done. All right, I'll meet you back. All right, everyone, so that is round 2, just to knit that round plain. And then for round 3, what you're going to do is you're going to knit 11, and then you'll knit 2 together. And then you'll do that for a total of 6 times for that round. And then when it comes to round 4, you're going to just knit another plain round. Then for round 5 of the decreases, you're going to just knit 10 stitches, and then you're going to decrease by knitting 2 together, and you'll do that for a total of 6 times. And then for round number 6, you're just going to knit a round plain, just knit every stitch. And then for round 7, that's going to be our last decrease round, so you're just going to go ahead and knit 9, and then you will decrease by knitting 2 stitches together. And then for round 8, you're just going to knit that round plain. So when you finish round 8, go ahead and meet me back at the video, and then I will show you how to close up the top of the hat. Okay, so if you do need more help with the decreases, just go ahead and rewind back to the part where I showed you at the front of the video, and that way you can get a little bit more practice with the decreases from there. But other than that, we're just repeating those same 2 rounds, decreasing and then knitting around plain. So just go ahead and finish those, and then I will meet you back to show you how to close off the top of the hat. And I'll have the instructions on the screen so that you guys can pause there and check that out as well. All right, I'll meet you back. All right, everyone, so I made it back and I have finished my decrease rounds, and I went ahead and cut about a 12 to 15 inch length of yarn, and I grabbed my yarn needle, because what we're going to do now is we're going to close up our hat by cinching it closed. So in order to do that, make sure you have about 12, cut your yarn about 12 to 15 inches from your last stitch. Okay, so cut that. And then when you have that cut, go ahead and thread your needle. Okay, so just like that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to slide the stitches off of the knitting needles onto our yarn needle. And then we'll pull the yarn through the stitches, and we'll pull on it gently so that we can begin to close up the top of the hat. All right, so all we're going to do is just go straight into the stitch. So you don't need to go like that as if you're knitting it. You just need to go straight into it and pull it off. So you can do this one stitch at a time if you want to take it slow, but if you're feeling a little bit more comfortable, you could always do a couple stitches at a time, and then it'll go a little bit faster for you. And then once you have a few on the needle, just go ahead and gently tug on your yarn and pull those through. And now those stitches are resting on your yarn. So it's important that we do this here, because normally in knitting you would bind off your stitches. And because these loops are live loops, so they're not closed off in any way. So if you don't secure them in some kind of way, they will slip all the way down your knitting, and you, as far as they go, and you'll just have a big hole in your knitting. So you don't really want that. So you want to make sure you get each stitch onto the needle so that it can go onto the thread, okay, or the yarn. So this is all we're going to do all the way around until we have all of our stitches off. So if you're feeling more comfortable, you can grab 2 or 3 stitches at a time. And as you grabbing your stitches, go ahead and push your stitches to the front of the needle. You can't do that too much at first, because you don't want to distort your stitches. But as you take more of them off, then you can push them up to the front. Okay, and then you can just slide more off onto your yarn needle at a time, just like that. So we're just taking those stitches off the knitting needle and putting them onto our yarn needle. Then we're just sliding them onto that strand of yarn. So then once we have all of them on there, we'll be able to tug the yarn, and it'll bring the stitches together and begin to close up the top of the hat. Alright, so I just got a few more stitches to go. Okay, so I just have about 2 stitches left. Alright, so that's all of those stitches off my needle now. And so now I can just begin to pull that close just like that. So we're just cinching it closed. You don't want to do it too tight, because then you could actually break your yarn, and that would not be good. So you do want to give it a gentle tug and If you notice like it's still a hole in there and you don't want to close it too tight, just go ahead and go under some more stitches in the same direction that you were going, and then just pull it a little bit tighter. Just gently close it. Okay, and if it feels like it wants to break on you, then you can just sew it closed by going back and forth across the top. And you can also put a pom-pom on the top as well. I'm just going to go ahead and go through a few more stitches all the way around. Not through every stitch. I'm going to skip a couple and then I'll just go under some more. But I'm going in the same direction that I was going. And then just pull it closed. Okay. Now I'm not for sure if I want to put a pom-pom on mine or not. So I'm just going to leave the tail on. But you can do whatever you like. If you're ready to sew that end in, go ahead and sew it in. You just go through a couple more stitches and I think that'll be good. Alright, so now our hat is closed at the top. So I'm going to take my yarn needle off and put that to the side. And like I said, I'm just going to leave that tail up at the top. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get ready to work on the brim of our hat. And we're going to be learning how to do the purl stitches. So I'm going to take this stitch marker off because I'm going to need this for the bottom of the work now. Oops. Okay, that's okay. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to pick up one loop of each stitch onto our needle. So this is where my tail is at, so that's where I'm going to start. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick up the front loops only of each stitch all the way around. So that should give us a total of 84 stitches all the way around. And then when I have mine picked up, I will come back and I will come meet you back and show you what to do next. But first, let me get you started. So let me grab my yarn. Alright, so this is pretty much like how we started off the hat. So you're just going to go ahead and insert your knitting needle into the hat. And go ahead and tension your yarn like you were getting ready to crochet. And pull that loop, or however you tension your yarn, pull that loop through, pull the yarn through the loop is what I'm trying to say. Alright, so we're just going to go through these front loops only across. So now I'm just going to go through the next loop and then I'm just going to pull that yarn through. And then that's how we're going to pick up these stitches. And then that'll push the other stitches to the back so that you get a smooth edge there. Alright, so we'll just go ahead and do that all the way around. And then when I have my stitches all the way around, I'm going to double check and make sure I have 84. And once I do that, I will come back and show you guys how we're going to knit the brim for this hat. Oh, let me do that one over. Okay. Alright, so I will be right back when I have mine all finished. Alright everyone, and I made it back. So I have all 84 stitches back on my needles. And so I'm going to take the yarn and wrap it back around my neck. So, oops, it's going to go, it's coming from the right hand needle, but I'm going to wrap it around the left side of my neck. So the yarn attached to the stitch is on the left side and my right hand is holding the working yarn, or the yarn coming from the ball of yarn. Okay, so that's how we're set up. And now we're going to get ready to work our brim. So let me go ahead and put my stitch marker onto, I'm gonna just put it right here to mark that so I know that's my first stitch. Okay, so go ahead and put your stitch marker on as well. And what I'm going to do now is the first 2 stitches are gonna be knit stitches. So we're gonna do a knit 2, purl 2, rib. Okay, so you all know how to do the knit stitch. All right, so we're just gonna take our right hand needle and curve it around to the left side of our stitch, insert our needle and flick our yarn and take that stitch off. Okay, so that was our first one, and here is our second one. Okay, so now the purl stitch. Okay, guys, so I hope you guys weren't worried about this because this stitch is easier than the knit stitch. And you kind of already done it already. So if you remember when we were cinching our hat closed and we were using our yarn needle to actually slip the stitches off, that is the same way we're going to insert our needle to make a purl stitch. Okay, but there is another step that you have to do before you do that stitch, okay, and that is to move the yarn. Okay, so right now for our knit stitches, our yarn is coming from the back of the needle. So as you can see, this is our stitch and the yarn is coming from behind the needle, or some even say on top of the needle. Okay, so it's behind the needle right now. So now all you do is you move your yarn to the bottom of the needle, or where it's coming from the front now. Okay, and then after you have the yarn there, so I'll do that again. So the yarn's on top. Now you just move it down. Okay, so now it's in the front. All right, so all you want to do now is you want to take your right hand needle and you're going to insert it straight into the stitch. Okay, so for the knit stitch, we go to the left of the stitch. For the purl stitch, we're just going to go straight into the stitch. All right, so all you're going to do is you're going to make sure your yarn is down in front, and then you're going to take your needle, your right hand needle, and go straight into that stitch. Okay, once you have it like that, you're going to flick your yarn over and then pull that stitch off. Okay, and now let's have a look at it. If you look, you can see the yarn is crossing over the front of the stitch and it's making this little bump. Okay, that is how you know you have purled the stitch correctly. Okay, so, and if you're knitting and you happen to notice this and maybe you didn't want a purl stitch, then you could easily recognize that and take it off the needle and then fix it. Okay, but for right now we do want a purl stitch because that's going to help us with our ribbing. Okay, so take a good look at what that stitch looks like so that you can recognize that stitch as you continue on in your knitting, and that will help you out when you're doing different projects. All right, so this is a knit 2 purl 2, so we have to do another purl stitch. So we're just going to go with our yarn in front. We're just going to go straight into the stitch, and then we're going to flick our yarn, bring that needle through and off. Okay, so now we have another purl stitch. All right, so now we're ready to do two knit stitches. Okay, so now we have to move our yarn back behind the needle. Okay, so it was down in front. Now we have to move it back. All right, and this is going to put us in position to knit again. So now we're going to knit 2. Okay, so now we're going to knit 2 stitches. Now we have to bring our yarn down in front, and now we have to purl 2 stitches. Okay, so this is not going to look like very much when you do the first round, but as you get going in your rounds, you will definitely see that rib stitch develop. Okay, but just keep an eye on these purl bumps and these knit stitches, because if you're like, oh, I can't remember if I just knitted 2 or if I just purled 2. So you can look at your stitches. So I have these 2 bumps here, so that means I just purled. Also, my yarn is down in front, so that means that I have just purled those 2 stitches. So I need to move my yarn back behind the needle, and I need to knit 2 stitches. Okay, so let's do a few more and then I will finish off camera and meet you guys back when I have it done. Okay, so now we're gonna let's see, our yarn was behind our needle, so now we're gonna bring it down in front, and now we're gonna purl 2 stitches. So we just go straight into the stitch, flick our yarn and pull it off, straight in there and pull it off. So those purl stitches are pretty easy, right guys? All right, so we got to move our yarn back now and knit 2. Bring our yarn down and we're going to purl 2. Oops. Bring our yarn back up in front or behind the needle, I'm sorry, and knit 2. Now we're going to bring it in front and purl 2. Okay, now we got to knit 2. Make sure you're putting your yarn in the correct position, because if you knit with your yarn, that's a good thing. So let's say I brought my yarn down, but I forgot to purl. Instead, I knit it. So if I knit with my yarn down like that, see how it makes that funny looking cross? You don't want to do that, okay? Because now it looks like you have 2 stitches on your needle, okay? So you have just increased, and that's not what we're doing right now. So we don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that if our yarn is down in front, that we purl the stitch, okay? And if we need to knit the stitch, we make sure we put it back behind the needle, okay? All right, so purl 2 and knit 2. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going and then I will meet you all back when I have mine done. All right, everyone, and I made it back. So I just finished my first round of the knit 2, purl 2 rib, and now we're going to do the same thing. So all you do is you just continue with your same pattern, knit 2 and then purl 2. So like I said, if you're not sure where you're at, because it can sometimes get easy to get lost when you're trying to think about, am I making the stitch correctly? Is my yarn where it needs to be? Sometimes you're like, well, what stitch did I just make? So just keep in mind that it looks like a V if you've just knitted it, and it'll have this bump if you just purled it, okay? So you'll see that purl bump. If not, you'll just see the V here, okay? So just keep an eye on your stitches, and that way you won't get lost. But other than that, we're just going to do the knit 2, purl 2 for about a total of 2 inches. And then once you have your 2 inches done, we'll come back to the video and I will show you guys how to bind off. And then that will be the finishing of your hat. And I am super excited to go ahead and get this finished so that you guys can enjoy your first knitted hat. All right, so let me go ahead and finish my knit 2, purl 2 rib off camera, and then I will be back to show you guys how to bind off. All right, everyone, and I made it back. So I did my 2 inches of ribbing, and now we're ready to bind off to finish off our hat. So the first thing you do to bind off, and this is just a very basic bind off. There are many bind offs, but I just wanted to show you guys the very basic one for this tutorial. So all you're going to do is you're just going to knit the first 2 stitches as normal. So make sure your yarn is in the right placement, and go ahead and knit those first 2 stitches. Okay, and then you're going to take your left hand needle and you're going to insert it into the very first stitch that you knit, and then you're just going to bring it over top of that second stitch. Okay, so do you see what I just did? I just brought that over. So let me see if I can show you guys again. Okay, so we knitted those 2 stitches. All right, so here's the first stitch that we knit, the second stitch that we knit. So we just want to go into that very first stitch, scoop it up, and we're just going to bring it over top of that second stitch. Okay, And now we have that one loop here on our needle. All right, so now we're going to knit the next stitch. So we're just going to knit, I'm sorry, this is a purl stitch, so we're actually going to purl that. So we're just going to purl that stitch there. We're just doing this in pattern. So when I see a knit stitch, I'm going to knit it. When I see a purl stitch, I'll purl it. So we're just going to go right into that stitch like we're going to purl it. And we're going to, so make sure your yarn is in front. We're going to go into it like we're going to purl, wrap our yarn, and bring that stitch off. And now we're going to take that stitch and then we're going to bring it over the one we just made. Okay. Whoops. Hold on 1 second. I'm grabbing them wrong. There we go. So now we're just going to bring that over top of that one. Okay. And as you get more stitches off the needles, you can push these stitches back and these stitches up. So I have another purl stitch. So now I'm just going to go in like I'm purling it. Yarn over and pull that off. Okay, and now we're just going to take this stitch and then bring it over this one. And you do want to do this a little bit loosely because if it's too tight, then the brim might feel too tight and not quite as stretchy. So you don't want to do it super tight. You just want to make sure it's nice and even. So that way you can have a nice stretch in your bind off. All right, so the next one we're going to do is we're going to knit that one. So I made sure my yarn was behind the needle, and now we're just going to knit that stitch, and we're just going to take this one and bring it over. Okay, and you can see now that these stitches have been binded off. They're further away from these live stitches that are still on the needle. So we'll be working our way all the way around until we get to these stitches here. Okay, so we have another knit stitch, so we're just going to go in like we're knitting it, and we're just going to go ahead and bring that over that last stitch. Okay, now here's another one. We're going to purl that one and bring it over. All right, and it gets easier as the more stitches you get off, because then you can push those up. And we're just going to purl that and then bring it over. And so remember, if you have the little bumps in front, that's a purl stitch. If you see the V's, that's a knit stitch. So that's how you know what you did there. So now we're ready to do a knit stitch. So we're going to knit that, and we're going to bring the last one over. All right, and we're going to knit this stitch, and we're going to bring that over. Okay. So we're just going to keep going like that all the way around until we have all of our stitches binded off. Oops, I need to move my yarn and tighten up my tension a little bit. Okay. So let me purl that stitch and take it off, or take this over that one. Okay. So just keep doing that all the way around. When you see a purl stitch, go ahead and purl it. And when you see a knit stitch, go ahead and knit that. All right, and then just bring that stitch over the second stitch. Okay, so just continue that all the way around, and I will be back when I have mine finished to show you how to do the very last stitch. So work it up until the last stitch, and then I'll be back to show you how to do that. All right, so I'll be right back. All right, everyone, and I made it back. So I just have this last stitch here to get bind it off, and it's a purl stitch. So I'm just going to go in like I'm going to purl it, flick my yarn, bring that off, and now I'm just going to take the left hand needle, scoop up that first stitch, and bring it over top of the second stitch. Okay, and now we're just left with this one stitch here. So I'm just going to take the yarn off my neck now. Oops, take it from this way. And then I'm just going to cut a length about 8 to 10 inches long, because you just need the tail long enough to weave in. So that should be fine there. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull my needle and pull that yarn through just like that to finish off. Okay. And then so now all you need to do is thread your yarn needle, and you're gonna weave this in, but you want to oops, try that again. Okay. Okay. All right. So you can see this looks a little taller than this side. So what I like to do is, just to finish it off, is I like to bring it like to up over here a little bit where it seems like it's a little bit taller. You could just weave this in however you like. So this is not really necessary to know how to knit or anything like that, but just how to finish it. So I just like to bring it over and then pull it tight. So see how that brings it close together now. And then I'm just gonna go right back to where my stitch came from, and then I'm just gonna go down like that. Whoops. And then that closes it off really nicely, and you have that little V like it was a knit stitch. So from there, all you have to do is just weave it into your hat, however you normally weave in your ends. And also you have to decide if you're going to put your pom-pom on or not. But other than that, we are all finished with our first knit hat. So we have the ribbed brim, and this is called a stockinette stitch. We have the stockinette stitch body of the hat where it's all in the knit stitches, and then we cinched up the top. So I really hope this tutorial was helpful to you, and I am so glad you went on this journey with me to learn how to knit. And I'm so happy to share this with you all. Now I will be doing some more knit tutorials. I have to show you guys how to cast on, because not every project that you might want to do will be you might not be able to use the or how we cast it on with that crochet chain. Now there are some patterns that do call for a crochet chain, and I believe it's called a provisional cast on. So that was something useful to you all, but that was just like to ease you into the getting knitted and learning how to knit and getting excited and seeing some progress, because I know that was one of the main things that was kind of stumping me up when I was learning to knit. So that is why I decided to do it that way. But I will be coming with some more tutorials, and I'm going to show you guys how to cast on and just how to knit back and forth with straight needles if you have straight needles, and some other things that might come up. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and thanks again for coming along with me, and I will see you in the next one.